Made by Music podcast with me, Sean Hannam. My guest today is a pop star, DJ, singer-songwriter, fashion icon, designer, artist, actor, and an author. And he achieved world fame in the 80s as a lead singer of Culture Club. Welcome, Boy George.
I wouldn't describe myself as a pop star, but I'm more of an artist, I suppose.
Yeah.
Pop star is.
You were a pop star.
I was, but what does that even mean anyway? I was always just a human being.
I'm really excited you're going to be sharing your music moments with me today. You're one of the pop stars. Sorry, I've said it again. I grew up within the 80s, and we mentioned this earlier before the interview, but I actually met you in 1990 when you played a festival at the Isle of Wight with Jesus Loves You, which we're going to talk about later. So 33 years later, I'm interviewing you. So it's karma, isn't it? If it's
I
come
always
around
ask people when they say they've met me, I always say, was I nice?
You were lovely.
Not always. But it's funny, I'll say, what was I like? And they'll say, oh, you were lovely.
So before we talk about your first music moment, let's go back to your childhood. So you were born in 61 in Bexley, and you grew up in Eltham in southeast London, didn't you? And your family are Irish, and you've said that their story is like a great Irish song, the sort of thing you'd hear someone singing at a funeral, a wedding, like a traditional lament. Can you tell me a bit more about that? What was your childhood and your family's background like?
I think when I was a kid, I thought my family were the most insane family on the street. You know, we lived in this 2 up, 2 down cul-de-sac. My dad had a big Bedford van on bricks in the garden that he never finished repairing. We had an Alsatian, we had chickens. I mean, we definitely stood out, and there was like 6 kids, a lot of smoke, a lot of cigarette smoke, a lot of washing, a lot of screaming. So when I was growing up, I always thought we were really odd. But then as the years went by, I realized that the difference between my family and, say, a lot of my friends was that everything was out in the open in my family. Everything was screaming and shouting. It was all on the surface. Whereas, a lot of my friends' families, it was much more undercover what was going on. Yeah. So it took me a few years to realize how normal we actually were. Irish. My mum was born in Dublin. My dad, I think, was born in the UK, but he's obviously Irish descent. And I think I was brought up with a very Irish sensibility. I think there is an Irishness, even when you live in the UK, that just, is very kind of obvious. My name's O'Dowd. Yeah. I grew up in the 70s where there was a lot of IRA bombings, so I used to get a lot of comments made about my name, and I was very aware of my Irishness and very proud of it, actually.
You went back and dug into it for Who Do You Think You Are, didn't you? And you found out some quite kind of interesting and quite tragic stuff in your family background.
Yeah, I found out that my uncle was one of the Forgotten 10, which, growing up, I knew about Kevin Barry. There was a very famous song called Kevin Barry that we used to listen to at Christmas. And they were kind of Irish rebel songs that were kind of allegedly banned in the UK, but we used to play them at Christmas. My auntie Kit used to say, put on the rebel songs, on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. And I kind of, growing up, I thought that my uncle was Kevin Barry. And then obviously when I did Who Do You Think You Are, I found out that it was my uncle Thomas Bryan, who was one of Kevin Barry's men. And they were buried in these unmarked graves for 70 odd years. And then very recently all brought back to Dublin and buried with great pride. I felt like it was confirmation of where my rebellious nature came from. I felt like, oh God, that's what it is,
So you talked about your Irish roots, and obviously there's a tradition of folk music in Ireland. Was there a lot of music in your house growing up? I know your parents liked things like Sinatra, Pearl Bailey, Peggy Lee, Judy Garland. Was there a lot of music on at home?
You know what? My mum loved music.
Yeah.
And I remember a really funny moment when I came home from school. My mum was ironing to Space Oddity, the album Space Oddity. Wow. She discovered that song, God Knows I'm Good. And she was like, oh, this is such a beautiful song. She didn't realize the kind of depth of Bowie's writing, and that kind of made her turn a corner. That song about the old ladies stealing
steak.
Steak, and she just thought it was amazing. And really, my dad was a builder, so often he would clear out houses and bring back records. It wasn't that the radio was always on. It was more of the kids that were into music. My mum loved Sinatra, Dean Martin. My dad used to sing when he was drunk, which was very, very rare.
Okay.
My dad would maybe have a drink at a family wedding or a funeral, and he would sing, and he had a beautiful voice. But it was music was always around, but it wasn't specific.
You like musicals as well, didn't you? Kind of South Pacific and that kind of thing when you were younger and things like that.
I grew up watching sort of Busby Berkeley films.
Yeah.
I mean, just, I suppose as a kid, I was kind of longing for sort of glamorous bohemian lifestyle that wasn't really happening in Eltham.
Yeah.
It was everywhere else but where I was. It was like that typical growing up in grey suburbia, wanting to kind of have a better life. And, obviously when I was very young, even about the age of 6 or 7, I was made to feel like an outsider because of my femininity and because of my interest in music and clothes and things like that. And so I was made to feel different by other kids long before I really knew what it was, but I've been talking a lot about this recently. Even when I was like 6 or 7, I understood that there was something different about me, and I wasn't particularly bothered by it, but I was aware even at that point that other people were bothered by it. So it was more about what other people felt rather than what I felt myself, I actually think that when I was a kid, once I realized I was gay, I was like, oh yeah, that's, it almost felt like it was meant to be.
Right.
Some people say they were born to be a priest.
Yeah.
I always feel like I was born to be gay. It never really bothered me, but I was aware that it bothered other people.
Yeah. Yeah. You talked about Bowie and your mum listening to Bowie. I know growing up, you were a huge fan of Bowie and Bolan. What was it about that? Was it that kind of otherworldly quality that they had, that glamour? Obviously, Bowie came from Brixton, Bolan came from Stoke Newington, they're from working class families in London. Was that something that was attractive to you, that glamour, that kind of otherworldliness?
It was more that they were like me.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, look, they're boys that are a little bit different.
Yeah.
They don't like football. They like sequins.
Yeah.
And rock and roll. Oh, there's other people. It was more like association.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the things about myself is that when I was growing up, even as a really young kid, I knew I was different. I wanted to be different, and people like Bowie sort of facilitated that. They validated me. It was like going to see Bowie in 1972 was like, oh, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
Hence the song Turn On With Me and You're Wonderful.
Yeah.
And I just felt like Bowie was, like a messenger.
Yeah.
It was like he came to bring a message to people like me.
A lot of people say when they saw that moment of him on the TV, doing Starman, that was a kind of big moment for a lot of people. A lot of young kids suddenly thought, wow, this guy's the real deal of the future,
I think, for me, at the time, it didn't really have that effect on me. I didn't really think of it in that way.
Yeah.
I didn't sexualize it.
Yeah.
But, it's funny how people rewrite history. It was like, oh, I remember that moment. But to me, it was just Bowie being Bowie.
Yeah.
Being provocative. Even when I went to see him at Lewis Schmodian, I was aware that there was a sort of strong sort of sexuality about Bowie, the way that he was dressed, what he was wearing. It was confusing. It was a very confusing message. It was like masculine, it was feminine, it was alien. What was it? And I think it was just outside the rules. And I think that's what was interesting about Bowie. It wasn't that he was gay or straight. It was that he didn't care. He was basically a straight man that was playing with the sort of gender roles and the boundaries of what's acceptable in society. But I don't think it was, I don't think it was gay or straight thing. It was just, it was just like no rules.
So we're going to play your first music moment, which is a Bowie song. It's After All by David Bowie. So we're going to listen to that in a minute. But first of all, tell us why this song is important for you. Why is it your childhood music moment?
They're painting their faces and dressing in thoughts from the skies. That was like me in my room with the lights out thinking, oh my God, he's talking about me. Yeah. He gets it. He understands who I am. And maybe he didn't, but that song just felt like it was a real message to me as a young kid. I just felt it was so powerful. And in fact, I heard it through my brother's bedroom walls to start with. He had The Man Who Sold the World, and I was hearing this music and saying, what's this? And I managed to kind of get that album from my brother. It was passed on to me. I think once Bowie sort of started doing Ziggy, my brother went to Alice Cooper and Rod Stewart. It's like, oh, it's a bit too feminine. Right. Go over here, And so I got gifted
the Bowie stuff,
the Bowie experience from my older brother, Richard. And, this song just is, I listened to it recently, and it had the same effect on me, really.
So listen to it now, After All by David Bowie. That's quite a sinister, creepy song. It's almost in waltz time, isn't it? It's kind of it's not one of his more well-known tracks, is it? I guess a lot of people probably don't know it so well.
Well, that album, everybody knows The Man Who Sold the World because of the Nirvana
Nirvana.
cover. But
Yeah.
I think that album is such a great album.
Yeah.
You know.
So the first Bowie album you went out and bought was Ziggy, wasn't it? Ziggy Stardust.
Yeah, first album I
Yeah.
got was Ziggy Stardust, and then of course everything. Basically since then, including all the German, Spanish, French, bootlegs, anything I could get my hands on. Really,
You experimented with some Ziggy style haircuts as well, didn't you? And fashion and things like that. Yeah.
my Aunt Jan was a hairdresser, so I thought I know what I'll do. I'll get her to cut me a Ziggy. I ended up looking more like Dave Hill. I didn't really have the hair, I didn't have that
Dodgy
strong
fringe.
hair, so it kind of flattened down. But it worked.
Didn't you go out to Haddon Hall where he lived and didn't Angie Bowie tell you to fuck off or something? Is that right?
One of my funniest memories, obviously, I had dinner with David Bowie in about 2005
Wow.
in New York, and by that point, he'd read my book, so he knew the story about Angie. I think I must have been about 10 and a half.
Wow.
Outside Haddon Hall with all these older kids, not just sitting outside the house waiting for him to come out. I don't know what we thought was going to happen, but at one point, Angie Bowie opened the window and told us to fuck off. And we were so happy. We were thrilled.
You're like, yes.
And David said at the dinner table, he said, tell us that story about Angie. And I said, oh, she told me to fuck off. And he said, it was the most interesting thing she said during the whole of the 70s. He was quite funny. I mean, on the night that I had dinner with him, he was, he was married to Iman.
Yeah.
It was Iman, myself, Hedy Slimani was the editor of Vogue, and my friend Michael Cavadias, who was an actor. And Bowie kept saying, don't listen to her. She's just a model. He was just so provocative and sweet and funny. And
Was that the first time you met him as well? Or?
it was the first time I'd sat down and spoke to him. I'd met him a couple of times.
Right.
I met him when I was 17.
Right.
And in fact, I did an insane conversation with Bowie online sometime in the sort of early 90s on the sort of wind-up internet. And we had this insane conversation. And I said to him, oh, I've never met you. And he goes, oh, I know I have met you. I met you when I met you at the Beetroot. He remembered meeting me before I was famous.
Wow.
And when I met him, I'd sort of spent this whole evening trying to side lutz him, looking cool, like I look like a mad fan. I had to look like I'm confident. And I sort of spent about an hour like moving towards him. And then eventually I sort of said hello. And he told me I looked like Klaus Nomi.
Yeah.
And I was very upset until I found out who Klaus Nomi was. And I was like, oh, fabulous. But on the night, I was like, I spent all this time getting ready and they told me I looked like someone else. But, in hindsight, it was a massive compliment.
Yeah. After the glam thing, you got into punk as well. You used to hang around outside Malcolm McLaren and Vivian Westwood's shop Sex, didn't you, in London as well? So.
I did. I mean, going up to the King's Road was a sort of pilgrimage for freaks. You just walk up and down the King's Road for no reason, no money and no reason to be there. But it was like a catwalk for freaks, and around the time of the punk thing, that was when all the sort of fighting started with the Teddy Boys and the rockers and the mods and the punks. And it was kind of terrifying sometimes, but it was also very thrilling and alluring, And, I got attacked a lot, because I was always on the sort of feminine edge of punk, a lot of makeup, and people didn't like it at all. They were very anti it, even though you think punk was so, you think it was so liberal, but actually there were a lot of, people that were quite aggressive and, didn't like the fact that, poofters and you got a lot of abuse. I got drinks thrown over me and kicked in the face once on a bus. I mean, I was always running from Teddy Boys. Always. I mean, thankfully over the years, I've always had a very strong radar for trouble.
Right. Okay.
So most of the time I would see people coming and go, quick, run. But sometimes you weren't quick enough,
How's the radar today? Is it going okay? Yeah.
Oh, my radar's still good now. Even because obviously then it was about the way I looked, but nowadays it's more about who I am, and if you bump into the wrong person on the street and they've got an issue with who you are, it can turn on a dime, so you've always got to be aware of where you are and who you are.
So from the punk thing, you kind of were known as one of those people. You went to the Blitz in Covent Garden, didn't you? Which was founded by like Steve Strange and Rusty Egan, who became Visage. And this was like post-punk years. I guess it was the early days of New Romantic. What was the kind of interest in that scene for you at the time? And why was the Blitz so influential? What sort of music were they playing there?
Well, you mentioned Steve Strange or Steve Harrington.
Yeah.
You know, Steve was a punk. You know, Steve was a very sort of well-known punk.
Yeah.
And I remember actually one evening following Steve Strange up Wardour Street, me and Jeremy Healy had seen Steve Strange and he had these Spider-Man boots on, which weren't yet released from Vivienne Westwood. And we were like, look, he's got Spider-Man boots. And we followed him up Wardour Street and ended up at the Vortex. You know, that scene was very small. And I think, you know, what people don't realize is that, you know, glam rock sort of bled into punk rock and then it bled into what was called neuromanticism. Yeah. But it really was just, you know, freaks, kids, you know, trying to find out who they were and, you know, jumping from one scene to the other because obviously music changes quite quickly.
Yeah, it's fatty, yeah.
And 1 minute you're into this, the next minute you're into that. But for me personally, I just, you know, even though I was a punk, I was still listening to soul music. I was still listening to Gladys Knight and the Pips. I was still interested in everything, you know, the Doobie Brothers, you know, the Eagles. There was no, I maybe didn't tell people.
Yeah. You were saying, I'm into Roxy Music, Susan the Banshees.
Well, I was into those. I was into those as well. Look, you know.
Yeah, there you go. You got Bowie and Bolan tattoos.
Yeah, I've got Bowie here and Bolan on my left and Bowie on my right. And yeah, I mean, I remember being at the Vortex the night Elvis died and people were cheering and I was so appalled, you know, because I was like, all right, that's taking it a bit too far, you know. Yeah. I mean, I enjoyed the whole spirit of punk, but I didn't necessarily always agree with the politics of punk.
Yeah. So you were hanging out with Martin Degville, who went on to be in Zig Sputnik. And through that scene, I guess you got to know Malcolm McLaren, who'd been hanging around his shop. But then you joined an early version of Bow Wow Wow, where you were known as Lieutenant Lush.
I love the way you say joined, like I had a choice in the matter. Yeah. Basically, it was all about friends. I was very friendly with Matthew Ashman, who was the guitarist in Adam and the Ants, and he was also in Bow Wow Wow.
Yeah.
And Matthew used to hear me singing all the time. And he was like, oh, you've got a really great voice and wish you were in the band. And I think Malcolm decided to, you know, they'd employed this kid, Annabella Lewin, who was like 14. They found her in a laundromat or something. And Annabella was a kid and they couldn't get her to do what she was told. And so Malcolm brought me in to kind of wind her up in a way.
Right, okay.
Because I was this, you know, young kid who looked totally like a girl. And he thought, this will wind her up. This will threaten her. So he brought me in to cause trouble. I don't think Malcolm really ever thought that I was ever going to be a pop star or, you know, an artist. He just thought that it was a sort of provocative gesture. So I did this gig at the Rainbow Rooms in Finsbury Park, where I was literally, they did this massive Bow Wow Wow concert. Everyone was there. It was like a big event with fairgrounds and all this madness. And instead of the band coming on in the encore, Malcolm pushed me on stage. And I did this song called Cast Iron Arm by Peanuts Wilson, this whole rock and roll song, which I'm actually about to re-record. Right, okay. I never sang, I only sang it once. So I thought it would be really fun to do it, to re-record it. And you can imagine the audience were horrified. They're like, who the fuck's this? Get off. And they were booing me. But I remember just thinking, oh my God, this is so exciting. This is what I need to do.
He sacked you, didn't he, McLaren, as well? Didn't he sack you?
He sacked me. So I did the gig at the Rainbow Rooms and then I did one gig at Manchester Apollo.
Right.
And at that point, I was very aggressive, very mouthy, very provocative. I remember driving up to Birmingham in the back of this van with Bow Wow Wow. And obviously I was in full drag. And I was like, obviously there were like lorry drivers like giving us the finger and bibbing us. And I was getting my, you know, taking my shirt off and showing my ass to them and just being unbelievably vile. And they hated me. The guys in the band hated me. I mean, they say they didn't, but they did. And I did this gig at the Manchester Apollo and they were all spitting at me. And I basically took the mic stand and started swinging it at the audience because I was like, you're spitting on me. I think Malcolm found me a little bit too aggressive, a little bit too much, which is hilarious. Hilarious, you know. And I found out that I'd been fired by, I opened the Melody Maker and there was a picture of me in the Melody Maker saying I'd been fired. So that's how I found out. And to be honest, I only started Culture Club just to get revenge on Malcolm.
Right.
That was the reason.
It worked out okay, didn't it?
Yeah. It did, actually.
So you were first called In Praise of Lemmings Culture Club, weren't you? Or one of the names.
Malcolm called me Lieutenant Lush. That was my name in Bow Wow Wow. And I don't know, around the time, because I was such a Banshees fan, I kind of wanted us to be a goth band.
Yeah.
So to start off with, our songs were very like, you know, gothy, you know, we were called In Praise of Lemmings. We had like songs about dying on stage. Just quite miserable. And when John Moss came along, he was like, this is really miserable. Like, you should be positive. You're never going to get played on the radio with a band called In Praise of Lemons. And then we were briefly called the Sex Gang Children.
Yeah, not going to have had on radio with that.
And John was like, it's never going to work.
Yeah.
And I gave the name to Andy Sex Gang.
Right.
He rang me up and said, are you using the name? And I said, no, you can have it. And it was just a mad time where, nobody really knew what they were doing. It was just this mad anarchic time. It was like, let's make music. Oh, let's be a supermodel. Let's, be a DJ. It was just really, there was no, for me personally, there was no plan of action. I was really the last person I knew that didn't have a job.
Right. Okay.
It was like when I was living in a squat and we got kicked out of these squats and we were all made homeless. And I suddenly looked around and I was like, I'm the only person who hasn't got, I've got nothing to do. I was kind of winging it. And so starting a band seemed like a pretty good idea. It was like, but it wasn't, I can't tell you, it wasn't thought out at all. It was like, I can sing a bit,
It's interesting, earlier you talked about the soul stuff that you were listening to as well, because there's always been obviously a pop element to Culture Club, but a big reggae influence as well, and a big soul side of it as well. Northern Soul was quite a good influence on Culture Club as well, wasn't it?
I think that I felt growing up as a kid, like soul music, black music was outside of music.
Yeah.
It was like reggae music particularly struck me because, I suppose Rastas were like the punks of the time.
Yeah.
They were like the punks of soul music. And I remember Mikey's mum wouldn't let anyone in the house with dreadlocks, but I was allowed in. But for some reason, because I was white, I was allowed into the house with dreadlocks, but anyone that was black, she wouldn't let in the house because they considered it to be, a bad thing. And, it's funny because I was celebrating all the things that, a lot of people felt were anti-establishment or unacceptable, but I just felt connected to anything that was about, I guess, suffering.
Yeah.
I think that with things like Gladys Knight, it was that I watched my parents' marriage that was so destructive and so violent sometimes. And those songs were like the dream, you're the best thing that ever happened to me. All those kind of memories. It was all about romanticism and,
ideal.
That's why I kind of felt like I connected to it. But the sort of, the reggae stuff was more about rebellion, reggae and punk and anything that made me feel, just made me feel vibrant. It was like when I hear a piece of music, it's always about what it makes me feel emotionally, whether it makes me want to cry or burn down a building. Those are the two options.
Yeah. Nothing in between. Yeah, extremes.
Anything in between is boring.
So your second music moment, a big influence on you, you've chosen Mississippi Goddamn by Nina Simone, which ties in nicely with what you were talking about, because that's a protest song. Nina Simone's described it as her first civil rights song. So it's from her album in 1964, Nina Simone in Concert. Why is this song? It's a protest song. Why is this song important for you?
I think it was the point where I realized you could say things in music, that you could actually make a statement in a song.
Yeah.
And that song, even though it didn't necessarily relate to my experience, I felt like as a young gay kid, I felt like it was something I could relate to, you know, that being an outsider. I mean, I'm not comparing my experience to what Nina Simone went through, but it's just that song, you know, it was just, when I first heard it, I was like, what's this about? And it made me really kind of explore the whole thing and, you know, made me understand who she was as a person. I mean, there's no singer on the planet that doesn't love Nina Simone.
Yeah.
You know, every singer always says, oh, she's a favorite singer because she got bled on the tracks. You know, it was like there was so much pain and anger in what she did. And I think that particular song, you know, the live version of that is just unbelievable. You know, I mean, I know it word for word. You know, this is you know, I mean every word of it. You know, it's just so, you know, and it got her into a lot of trouble.
Yeah, it did, yeah.
You know, I always found her very fascinating, you know, because I think as a Gemini, you know, there's two people. There's the civilized person, there's the insane person. And so people often say Geminis are two-faced. It's not that we're two-faced. We're able to see both sides of every situation. We can love and hate you at the same time, which is really a phenomenon to Geminis. you know, we can say, yeah, I hate that person, but I also kind of get it. You know, like someone like Morrissey is a really good example.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, but I completely love him.
Yeah.
And I know you're not supposed to say that.
Yeah.
But I've said it.
So let's listen to Mississippi Goddamn by Nina Simone. Apparently she wrote that song in an hour, apparently. Do you always find, have your best songs come in an hour or less than an hour, do you find?
I think if you've got an axe to grind, Chrissy Hind, you can write something really quickly.
Yeah. It's like a show tune, that Nina Simone song. It starts like a show tune, doesn't it? As well,
I think she says it's a show tune, but I mean every word of it. So I think as a writer, you understand all the time, if you're smart, that everything's connected.
Yeah.
You know, everything already exists in a way, and you're just using elements of it to create the sound that you want.
Yeah.
So someone like Bowie was a really good example of somebody that was very theatrical, and then there was soulful, and it was a bit this, and it was just everything thrown into a sort of big wok. And that's how you kind of end up with this unique sound, because, as I say, there's nothing you can write that hasn't been written. There's nothing you can say that hasn't been said. It's really about how you say it that makes it unique to you.
So from Nina Simone in the Deep South to Culture Club at Crocs nightclub in Rayleigh in Essex, October the 24th, 1981. It's your first gig, isn't it? It's Culture Club.
And I sang with my back to the audience.
Dave Garner from Depeche Mode was in the audience, wasn't he?
He was. We were so delighted. Like Depeche Mode were there. And obviously I bought their first single, so I knew who they were.
Yeah.
And I remember that gig so well. And I remember like most of the show, I just basically had my back turned to the audience. And we had maybe not that show, but in those days, we got a lot of heckling.
Right.
There was a lot of abuse. So I definitely, honed my sort of heckling skills in those days. I was always having rows on the stage and effing and blinding and, just having arguments with people and, it was almost like a ball over from punk. It was there was still that kind of punk attitude when you did live gigs. Like, oh, come in there and show us what you're made of. You're rubbish. I mean, you get a lot of abuse and, yeah, you had to be quite tough.
Yeah. So you signed to Virgin in the UK in the early 80s. You had 7 top 10 hits in the UK, 6 top 10 singles in the US. You're massive. I think people will forget now. At the time, I was growing up in the 80s. You were always on telly and in charts. You were huge, weren't you? The first few singles didn't do that well, but it was Do You Really Want to Hurt Me, which was your big breakthrough. So UK number 1, 1982.
I'm always interested when people talk to me in past context.
Yeah.
You were, I am. There's no were, I still exist. So,
but the band,
it's that kind of weird pop moment that you kind of explode and, everybody tells you're amazing. And then, suddenly it's, you only talked about in past context. You were this and you were that. And like, I'm very
still
much here, honey. And better than I ever was. I mean, I actually consider myself to be a much better artist than I was in 1982 or 1986. I think that much like anything, you get better at something the more you do it. And I dedicate probably more time and more passion to what I do than I did back then. I was winging it back then.
Yeah.
I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. I was literally had no idea what I was doing. I had no musical training. I was basically walking through the eye of a storm. And Culture Club kind of just happened so quickly. It went from sort of no one wanting to sign us, saying, oh, we'll never be a pop star. Look at him, he's in full drag, to us exploding all over the world. And suddenly, you're being interviewed and asked questions about things you've got no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I've read some mad interviews. I'm talking about the Pope.
Yeah.
I'm like, what do I know about the Pope? It's so fascinating that,
everyone wants your opinion on everything. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's like, and you feel obliged to say stuff.
Yeah.
And that's where the headlines come from.
Lots of British bands have failed to crack America. What do you think Culture Club did so well in America as well as the UK?
I think we were lucky.
Yeah.
It was being in the right time at the right place, in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know, because in a way, when I go back to those early days, nobody really thought we were ever going to be a big successful pop band, at least all us. I mean, it was kind of, in the beginning, it was like, oh, let's make a record. Let's do some gigs. Oh, let's design an album sleeve. It was all very exciting and kind of humble. And then suddenly, overnight, you're thrust into this kind of spotlight And there's no kind of guidebook. No one tells you what to do. You just kind of, get on with it. And it was kind of exciting, but I don't know, I kind of enjoy it more now.
Yeah.
In a weird way.
How's it? Because you're still going with, you've split up and reformed. You're about to support Rod Stewart on tour, aren't you? So how is it now?
We split up and reformed more times. We're like Liz Taylor.
You said it was like a bad marriage, yeah.
We're literally like, we're like, I mean, listen, I love doing Culture Club and I love doing me.
Yeah.
I think, again, back to the Gemini thing, I think all of those things work. A DJ, I'm an artist. I have to be creative.
Yeah.
So, and I work in a very fast way.
Yeah.
So, a lot of people can't keep up with me. And people will say, well, why do you do what you do? And I say, I don't know why I do it. I just have to do it. Whether it's writing a song or making a piece of art or making clothes.
Yeah.
I just get bored very easily. I even get bored with what I'm doing.
We're going to choose your third music moment, which is one of your own songs. You've chosen "Bow Down, Mister" by Jesus Loves You. So tell us a bit about that, because obviously this is the sort of late 80s, early 90s, and you're looking at, you got into electronic dance music, you've got your own dance record label, More Protein, and you've launched your solo career. How did the kind of your interest in the Hare Krishna movement and Jesus Loves You come about?
Well, it started with fashion, I have to be really honest. So I was like, oh, they look good. Why are they wearing that? With literally that shallow. It's like, they look interesting. I'm going to go and talk to them.
Yeah.
And, I guess growing up, anything exotic was alluring to me.
Yeah.
So if I saw someone dressed differently in the street, it didn't turn me off, it turned me on.
Yeah.
Whether it was a rabbi or a Hare Krishna or, a monk or anything. I was always like, oh, well, who are they? I was fascinated.
Yeah.
And Bow Down, Mister was, I went to India on this kind of search for sort of spiritual identity. I went to India. It's a bit like the Wizard of Oz, It's like, I remember my friends saying, you don't really have to go to India. But being in India kind of ignited this kind of interest in spirituality. And, it really is only very recently that I started to understand why I went there, what I wanted from being there, or what I wanted from my life spiritually. And Bow Down, Mister was this song that I wrote literally after being in India for 3 weeks. I came back to London. I said to Culture Club, I've got this song, the melody's written, it's already written. If you can add something new to it, then I'll give you publishing. But if you can't, I'm just going to keep it.
Yeah.
And they couldn't. And I kept it. And I remember at the time, when we used to play it, people were a bit hostile because it was like, why are you singing about this cult? Why are you trying to, what do? You're trying to convert us. And over the years, this song has become this kind of very special gear. Even in America, it was never released. When we do it now, people really love it and they get involved in it and they throw flowers on the stage. And there's a kind of openness towards the message of the song. But at the time, people just were like, oh my God, what's he doing now? What's he trying to turn us on to? And it was, even I felt intimidated around sort of Hare Krishnas because I didn't understand that, God, whatever you want to call God, it's just a word, and I don't believe in God in the kind of traditional sense of how other people do. But even now, I've just written this new song and I was saying it, Hare Krishna, God is mine. Because actually at the time I thought, I have to have it explained to me. And now I realize I don't have to have it explained to me. Whatever God is, it belongs to all of us. It's not something that somebody else has because they chant or because they wear a certain thing or because they don't eat meat or because they sit under a Bodhi tree. It's everything is God. Everything. The good, the bad, everything. It's all God.
The ugly.
It's just a word. Unfortunately, that we use that doesn't necessarily explain what it is we're searching for.
So let's listen to Jesus Loves You and Bow Down, Mister. One of the things you mentioned earlier was changing how I guess like Bowie always did it image-wise, but also song-wise. I really like it when you've done like the rock stuff as well, like Cheapness and Beauty is one of my favourite records by you. And then you did pop things, obviously you did the reggae, Everything I Own, and you worked with the Pet Shop Boys on The Crying Game. Did you find before the dance music, electronic thing, were you kind of a bit lost? Because Tense Never's Headache, which came out, that was kind of like, you'd worked with Bobby Z, you worked with Prince, you'd worked with Teddy Riley, the New Jack producer. Was that kind of lost period for you?
Wasn't lost, but I worked with Teddy Riley before he got good. I think he gave me all the songs Janet Jackson didn't want. Basically, it wasn't lost. It was like, I think I was being bullied by the label and bullied by everyone around me to repeat myself. Why aren't you doing that again? And this is the fascinating thing about success and fame, is that you start a band, you know, everyone's like, oh, you're amazing, you're so different. And they just want to make you repeat yourself over and over and over. And I think that battle continues even to this day.
Yeah.
But I very much feel like I'm outside of the music business.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm in the music business, because if you want to be in the music business, you have to sort of abide by the rules.
Yeah.
And I think that that's just not something that appeals to me. And I think the music industry gets in the way of creativity.
How has the music industry changed? You've owned a label, you've been in the mainstream pops
Well,
world.
it hasn't changed.
Is it not? No, not really. In 40
I've
odd
changed.
years. Yeah.
The music business hasn't changed.
Yeah.
I've just evolved outside of it. And I realised what a load of old bollocks it all is. You know, people say it's really hard to write a song. No, it's not hard to write a song. It's hard to get a song played.
Yeah.
But, you know, I don't think it's hard to write a song, because I think if once you know what you want to say, all you're doing is using words that already exist.
Yeah.
You know, it's how you put them together is what makes it magical, or makes it a representation of you. You know, I've never, ever not been able to write a song.
Yeah.
There's been periods where I've written songs that maybe I'm not so proud of, but that doesn't really happen now, because I know what I want to say. And even when I don't know what I want to say, that's good as well. Because, you know, if I've got an obvious idea, I know the song's going to be obvious. Whereas if I'm like stuck, I'll just go on Google, you know, just Google the word angels, or Google the word trains, or Google the word beard, you know, and I eavesdrop a lot on conversations. Anything anyone says to me can become a lyric. You can write a song about a paper bag if you want.
Yeah. You're quite a prolific songwriter. Do you write songs a lot?
I write so many songs.
Do you? Yeah.
You know, our studio at the moment is like the pyramid.
Right.
It's just so much music. We've even forgotten what we've done.
Right.
Right now, I kind of, you know, I'd like to do something really mad, like release 5 albums on the same day, like a dance album.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really believe in genres.
Right.
But, you know, if you want to be specific, like a dance-based album, something reggae, something more rock and roll, something more spiritual. I kind of feel like I've got enough music to do that right now, and it would be kind of quite mental. People say, why would you do that? I'm like, for that very reason.
It's interesting because you've sat in the you've sat in
Why would you do it? I don't know. Because it's something to do.
You've sat in the mainstream, but then you've made experimental dance records, underground stuff. It's you know, and you've, as you say, you've done the kind of mainstream TV and the pop thing. But you kind of you're quite happy having your, you know, straddling both camps. For
Well, I don't really know what I want to do.
No.
Do you know what I mean? I don't see why I have to. You know what I mean? I think as a DJ, I got a lot of criticism for not being like, oh, you're not a techno DJ, or you're not a trance DJ. What are you? I'm like, well, I don't want to be anything. You know, I got into music business because I wanted to be interested, not rigid. You know, so when people say, they say that as an insult, that's a compliment to me. It's like, yeah, I'm not that. I don't know what I am, and I'll let you know when I've decided.
Yeah. Come back to us on that one. So I'm going to talk about your fourth music moment, which is your ultimate music moment, and you've chosen Geraldine by Las Vegas, which is, I'm really excited you chose this because I've not heard this song for ages, and I listened to it again yesterday. I was like, this is such a great song.
It is. It's so exciting. Every time I play this song, I'm like, oh, wish I'd written this.
So what do you love about it?
I like the fact that he sings in a really thick Scottish accent. I like the fact, well, it's a great song. It's like Wall of Sound.
Yeah, so Phil Spector.
It's like it's Phil Spector, punk.
Yeah.
And, you know, the fact that it's the lyrics, my name is Geraldine, I'm your social worker. I mean, fucking just brilliant.
It's underserved jobs in songs, isn't it, social work? You don't hear so many songs about social workers.
But you don't hear the word Geraldine in a song. No one writes a song about Geraldine. I mean, it's like, but, you know, just the whole message of the song, you know, I'll talk you back from the ledge.
Yeah.
You know, it's just such a beautiful, beautiful, optimistic, uplifting song, but with a sort of darkness. That is, and the guitars. I mean, every time I play this song, it just makes me jump around like a crane. In the same way that Mississippi Goddamn. Yeah. Why I put them together? Because I thought they're both songs that make me want to burn down buildings. I mean, I'm not advocating that. I mean, metaphorically, but yeah, just love that song so much. It's one of those songs I could play all the time. And people are always surprised that I like it. I'm like, why? It's great songwriting.
So let's have a listen to that now. Geraldine by Glass Vegas. Apparently that's based on a true story about a woman called Geraldine, a social worker who gave up her job to follow Glass Vegas and sell their merch. Could Culture Club have done with a social worker on tour, do you think? Would that have worked out? Selling their merch or doing other stuff?
I don't know whether it would have helped us.
I want to come up to date as well and talk about some of the stuff you've done more recently. So you've worked with Paul Weller recently. He's one of my favourite singer-songwriters. So you sang on One Tear from Kind of Revolution, which came out in 2017. Yeah. That's kind of dreamy house track. That's a bit different for Weller, isn't it?
You know what? I think Paul would be the first to say, like, he didn't like Bowie back in the day. And then he kind of discovered his inner Bowie.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've always loved Paul's music. I've always loved The Jam. I've always loved Style Count. I just always loved Paul. He's a Gemini.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
There you go. Yeah, that's the reason.
Yeah.
Morris is a Gemini.
There you go.
So's Donald Trump. So I don't.
I'm an Aries. I don't know what that says, but you know.
Well, you're going straight to hell. But yeah, Paul Weller is just someone I love and respect. You know, and I've known him a long time, and we've always talked about writing together and singing together, and you know, it's happened a couple of times. I did. Obviously One Tear, and then I did.
You did.
I did a live thing with him that was amazing.
Did You're the Best thing, didn't you, with the BBC Symphony Orchestra? That
We've
was
never
fantastic.
really got round to actually physically writing with each other, and I think it would be difficult because we're both Geminis, you know, and we don't really want other people's help. We don't need it or want it. You know, people try to influence us, and we're like, oh, fuck off.
You both sang on. You both sang on Doing There It's Christmas as well, didn't you?
We did. Yeah.
Is that when you first met?
No, we actually met through Marilyn.
Oh, okay.
Marilyn had a bit of a crush on Paul. And one of the things I've always loved about Paul Weller was there was this amazing interview where he was asked if he'd had an affair with Marilyn.
Yeah.
And Paul said, well, if you said it happened, it must have. Which is such a brilliant rock and roll thing to say. Why apologise?
And they played
It's
it.
not true, but you can say.
The Star Council played Live Aid, but Culture Club didn't play Live Aid, did they? What happened there?
Oh, such a long, boring story. Buy the book.
Do you follow new music? You talked to, talking about writing and lots of ideas in the studio. What have you been listening to recently? And are you into kind of new or old stuff?
I don't really know. I don't really understand the concept of new music.
No, sure.
Because I feel like I've been around so long. I'm like, that's not new.
Yeah. Our new
everybody's really trying to repackage things and sell you something that's like, oh, that's just dubstep or that's just reggae. Yeah. You know, I mean, I like writing.
Yeah.
I'm not so, when I was a teenager, I was obsessed with artists, and, I'm still obsessed with those people that I loved when I was a kid. I still play the Banshees. I still play a lot of Bowie and T-Rex and, Leonard Cohen, Charles Aznavour. There's just so many people, Leirita Mitsuko, a French band, I love what I love and I still play it. And I suppose that because I'm a writer, I'm not so baffled by what other people do. People say, isn't this one a genius? I'm like, no, they're just working the field of genius. But the music industry wants to convince you that only 5 people can do it. It's like, there's a list, Ed Sheeran, Adele, and this one, that one. It's like, and it's what I do.
Yeah.
So, I'm not as kind of mesmerized or baffled as other people might be because, I have to watch what I say.
Yeah.
Because people say, isn't it great? And I go,
well, people like people who speak. Well, I like people who speak their mind. But,
it's great if you never go out.
Do you buy many records?
Well, you don't need to buy records.
No, you don't buy vinyl. You don't vinyl. Are you a vinyl collector?
Yeah,
or do you,
I do have obviously my vintage vinyl, and then people always buy me vinyl for my birthday, which is lovely.
Yeah.
So people, I think there's certain records that sound amazing on vinyl.
Yeah.
And I've got those records, and I don't know really. I'm so immersed in songwriting myself. I don't really have time to listen. And that sounds a bit weird. I mean, I don't listen to the radio.
No.
So, people say, oh, it's all over the radio. I'm like, if something's a massive hit, you'll hear it in a car.
Yeah.
In a supermarket. You can't avoid it, can you? There was one point where Justin Bieber, so even if you hear it under a rock, you've heard it.
Omnipresent.
So, of course, I'm in pop culture, so I do hear things, but because I know the way that the industry works, the way radio works, it doesn't really turn me on. Yeah. Because I know what it's trying to do, and I'm not interested in being involved in it. Like, I don't want to be mesmerized by you. I'd rather I don't know. I still like weird bands that no one's heard of, like Pink Military. Have you ever heard of them?
No, there you go.
One of the greatest bands ever. Does God Believe in Animals? Such a great song. You know, I feel like...
That sounds like a Morrissey song title.
Exactly. The Fatal Microbes, Violence Grows. You know, that's still a song I play. I think only 5 people ever bought that record, but to me, it's one of my favorite records of all time and so prophetic. Do you know that song?
No, I don't.
Oh my God. Violent children at home, they come and go. Their parents can't say no because they know what's best, because they know that violence grows. It was almost like a prophecy, that song. It's like a dub.
Okay.
Like this mad dub song. You know, it's really, you know, I just feel like you can like something that other people haven't heard of.
Yeah.
You know, and that's very true of me. I'm like, I don't care if you like it. I like it.
So we're coming towards the end of the interview. What plans for this year? So we talked about, you got Culture Cup coming up and you're writing. Any more solo record, another book? What have you got in the pipeline this year?
Loads of new music.
Yeah.
Just over the last 2 years, I've just been putting things out, often without any announcement, just putting it out, you know, because some of my favorite records I heard in my friends' bedrooms, you know, or people turn me on to things. And I think there's a kind of laziness about the way that we hear and enjoy music now, you know. I suppose in that respect, I'm quite old school. You know, I'm happy for someone to turn me onto something. I mean, when I discovered Little Jimmy Scott, I couldn't believe that I'd never heard this guy. It's like, where have I been? So I like to rediscover things. I love it when, you know, often sit on YouTube and find things that, oh, wow, I didn't know about this, you know. So, yeah, I just love music, you know, and in a way, like radio doesn't love music.
Yeah.
Which is why I don't love radio. Because, I mean, the one reason I love the 70s is it was so insane. You had Cliff Richard, the Goombay Dance Band, the Sex Pistols, you know, Danny LaRue. I mean, I think it should be an assault on your senses constantly. I don't believe in, like, formulaic anything. I think it's really, you know, it's the enemy of creativity. Formula is the enemy of creativity.
Thank you so much for coming in and joining me today, Boy George.
I've enjoyed being on my soapbox.
It's been an absolute pleasure to find out your music moments. Talk about your influence in your wonderful career.
And, you know, and they're just, I mean, it doesn't even touch the sides.
We could be here for the whole rest of the day.
We could be here for a year.
Yeah, well, 33 years. I mean, that was the last time I met you. So, yeah, thank you so much. All the best for the future with your new projects. I'm going to go off and listen to some Pink Military now and find out some music that I don't know about.
Yeah. Ay, 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 me.
Next time on Made by Music.